We are where we are. We accidentally formed government out of our common despise of the ANC. Why don't we just allow this accident to be something else? Why can't we work towards a coalition? Why can't we share power? And Mashaba spoke about that idea of co-governing and sharing power. Why can't the DA also come around on that as well? The DA also as well. I mean, the relationship between Mashaba and the DA, no doubt, it has got impact on whether you form coalition in Johannesburg, Gauteng, because of the history. But I think they can overcome that.
Hello, my name is Donald, and welcome to the #1 media company, WorldView. At WorldView, we explore everyone's perspectives on all things that can broaden our worldview. Today, we're talking with Dr. Ralph Mathekga. The doctor has been a lecturer and economic researcher at the Institute for Democracy in South Africa, and he has worked at the National Treasury. The doctor is the author of books such as Ramaphosa's Turn and the ANC's Last Decade. He has also written over 400 opinion articles in various newspapers and magazines, both locally and internationally. Doctor, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Donald, and great pleasure to be talking to you, and greetings to your viewers.
Absolutely, the same. And so, Doctor, in your book, The ANC's Last Decade, which I would recommend to anyone, it's a very interesting book about pertinent subjects that we will cover in this interview. You mentioned that where a lot of things went wrong for the ANC is where they embraced democratic centralism. What is democratic centralism, and why did the ANC lose its plot because they embraced that?
I mean, I think that the biggest challenge that the ANC faced when it comes to transforming from being a liberation party to a modern party that embraces open ways of engaging, transparent ways of decision-making, and open engagement is because of this principle of democratic centralism, which is often browsed through. Sometimes you hear about it being spoken about in the media. But when you go back to look at its origin, it actually has got the origin in the Soviet-style leadership, which has had an influence on the ANC, which is the Russian Communist Party. Some historians have done a great work on that. Just try to understand the whole process of decision-making of the ANC. Why is it so elusive? I mean, within the ANC, they don't raise hands and count and make decisions. There is the idea that we agree, the branches are following. But when you look at it, it lacks transparency, it lacks consultation. It's actually a very centralized form of leadership that we often see in communist style type of leadership. There are different permutations of that, and I do think that the ANC it has been trying to experiment with that idea of democratic centralism, whereby the key decisions are understood to come from the center of the party, which get the wisdom in a way that it is not well explained, it's not really transparent, but somehow there are those that encapsulate this wisdom of the party. And if you look at it at the end of the day, nobody understands how decisions are being made. You find that it creates an environment for domination of a few elites within the party. But those are central characteristics of your communist parties, your Communist Party of Russia, some would say even the Communist Party of China to even a greater extent. And until we go back and locate this democratic centralism as a method of making decision, as a method of justifying decision, and how it can survive within a democratic framework where we are. I mean, in most cases, you look at how decisions are made within the ANC, you try to justify them within the path that is set for everyone through institutions such as the courts, democracy. They don't fit. It is very difficult to understand how decisions are made within the ANC unless you are ANC members. So that, I think, has been the major source of problem when it comes to the ANC transforming itself and leading in a modern society whereby it actually appreciates a sense of accountability and being answerable, somehow answerable through a clear bureaucracy.
So is the problem with the democratic centralism also that it doesn't enable the ANC to correct itself. So they won't learn anything from this local election result because they don't have the ability to correct themselves because they follow that principle.
Exactly. It does not allow for self-reflection. I mean, it does not allow for self-criticism. We often hear that the ANC is a broad church for all. We are open to ideas. But if you look within the party structure, you look at the practices, what seems to be lacking for me is a rigorous process through which people can engage with the party and self-reflect. And you cannot correct. Actually, if you look at what people call self-correction that seems to be underway within the ANC, the step aside and all these sorts of things, you look at them, they cannot be resolved within the ANC because the ANC's internal structures are part of the problem. They lack recourse. Those issues end up in the courts because that is where the whole thing is happening. It's happening in the courts because the ANC lacks internal recourse to assist itself to weather through the storm.
Was the leadership election in 2017, the ANC leadership election, really that close? Wasn't really a vote of first preference. So, for example, you could have voted for Dr. Dlamini Zuma, but you can still like Ramaphosa. So, and that would explain why Ramaphosa is still powerful within the ANC. So, isn't the media in general overstating how close the 2017 leadership election was?
Indeed, I mean, if you look at it, actually, the odds were stacked against Ramaphosa. He was an outsider by then. He had been a deputy, and a deputy came through from business. And if you look at Dlamini Zuma and the faction, President Jacob Zuma's faction, they were still in charge of state institutions. And I think that if you look at the war that was waged by Ramaphosa, it gained more traction outside the ANC. It was a very interesting type of a battle whereby had Ramaphosa lost within the ANC would have been punished outside by voters when they go into the election. He survived within the ANC, but we see it and characterize it as a very close fight because at the center of it, the ANC has not actually decided whether it wants to go the Ramaphosa route. If we characterize Ramaphosa route as the route of reforms, as the route of accountability, compared to maybe the radical economic transformation route, which is what President Jacob Zuma's allies are known for. Mostly it's about consolidation, it's about more intervention by the state, it's about creating state banks and so forth, as it is reflected in some of the resolutions of the ANC. The battle was close in that view, that you have had ideas, you have had a compromise in terms of ideas. It was not decided. No group actually won. If you look at the resolution, they were mixed, actually. Some expropriate land without compensation, but there is a disclaimer. Do it within the confines of the reality of the economy. Do not ruin the economy. So from that point of view, no one actually won the battle there. No one won the power battle there. President Ramaphosa won the presidency, but not really the power battle. The bigger part of the power still remained within the Zuma people, and it constantly was getting dislodged, as we are seeing what is happening at Eskom as well today.
Do you think or do you know if there was any evidence of people being bribed to vote for either Ramaphosa or Dr. Dlamini Zuma in that conference?
I mean, I've attended many ANC events. I mean, I attended the Nasrec event. I go with the media contingency. And I think this is the conference that members have gotten the closest to admitting the exchange of money. But there's always been this rumor. We were in Mangaung in 2012. There are always this rumor. Even NC members are accusing each other of buying members' votes there at the conferences. You never have a smoking gun. There's never been an investigation by the NC that could result in specific findings about this thing. There's never been, they say that let the sleeping dogs lie. As far as the NC is concerned, they don't ruffle the feathers. Most often when the NC leaves a conference, when the NC is done with the conference, they close it. They then go to the next one. They never investigate anything. We then wait. So you hear strong rumor about the circulation of money. And again, President Ramaphosa the amount of money that is being spoken about the CR17 campaign, there is no way that a certain amount did not filter to the branches. Someone will have to disprove that, and they can sue me, but they are going to have a lot of work of disproving this allegation that there is no way that the money that is so shrouded in secrecy did not get to that point of influencing how things went at the branch level.
So it seems, Doctor, that the next ANC conference in 2022 will be extremely important. Do you think Ramaphosa will emerge as the victor and as the leader of the party, and also policy decisions? And do you think you'll have enough time to rectify some of the mistakes made by the government before the next election?
They are not guaranteed for the second term. Clearly, they will. I don't know. The ANC is in a crisis. I don't know whether the crisis that the ANC find itself in, I mean, for me, it could result in two opposite things. Either the party could rally. I mean, they've just had a dismal performance in local government. I mean, they lost the council last night. The only thing they could do is to disrupt some of the councils in Ekurhuleni, in Gauteng metropolitan centers. The ANC is receding in the society as these elections are demonstrating. So they could reflect on all these things by supporting Ramaphosa and decide that they're not going to have a conference that is being contested, or they could blame him for what just happened and decide to go after him, and they go straight to internal leadership battle from now on, instead of even figuring out a strategy for 2024. Either way, they are in trouble. It's all about what is the best way to mitigate where they are. And for me, the best way to mitigate is to stick to Ramaphosa. Maybe he will be able to help them arrest the decline that could be impending in 2024. But to experiment with someone else, to experiment with radical economic transformation, look at the anger that has been expressed by South Africans in this local government election. I don't think the ANC would like to dare the voters a bit more. I don't think they want to do that.
And it seems like the RET faction doesn't really have a leader that can challenge Ramaphosa in 2022.
I mean, at this point, Ace Magashule used to be what you can call the poster boy of the RET faction. But I think now they don't have a leader. And this is both a problem and an opportunity. It's an opportunity in a sense that probably Ace had to step aside, even from the RET. He was even a liability to the RET project, whatever its potential. And now there is an opportunity to get someone who's less tainted to be able to lead the RET. We don't know. And it could be that opportunity, or it could just be the death of the RET as we have known it. But I think the challenge goes beyond the RET. I think there is an opportunity for moderates to come out who are not too different from Ramaphosa, and who could come and say that, look, we truly represent unity, and we think we can unite the party given the crisis. The thing is that each and every crisis presents an opportunity, and the opportunity presented can always result in that becoming misfortunes for Ramaphosa.
Absolutely. And it seems like an opportunity for Ramaphosa was a few years back when the Treasury leaked a document of how they wanted to reform South Africa. It was leaked, I believe you mentioned in your book, by the Ramaphosa camp. Doesn't that demonstrate that he is either weak or his position is very weak, that he is unwilling to publicly support it, you can only leak it. But once the tripartite alliance is involved, that document disappeared. So is he weak or is his position weak?
I mean, that is supposed to be Treasury's take on the reforms, and Treasury is looking at things from the budget point of view. I mean, I understand Treasury. They'll look at issues from the fiscal point of view to say, you've got to tighten up there. So they came up with that 56-page document. But the manner in which it was released, it was very interesting. It was actually released through Treasury, but not through, or not firstly to alliance partners such as your SACP and COSATU, so that it can be processed politically. So in that way, President Ramaphosa actually demonstrated that he's willing to let Treasury go it alone on this document, because he understood that politically the document prescribe or speak about dealing with the growing public sector wage bill. It's all not good for the trade unions. So the president does not have political support for that. And the document gets presented by National Treasury. It comes out as a document that could help South Africa in the middle of a crisis. But then the COVID hit. After the COVID, the president goes back to that to say, perhaps some of the reforms. But then government goes into the crisis of credibility with the mismanagement of the public, the personal protection equipment money, as it's happening across the world. When you mismanage money, you then have a problem in asking everybody else to tighten the belt. And it becomes a problem. And Treasury is back now under a new minister. Tito Mboweni was gone. I mean, we all know also why Tito Mboweni left. It's not because he was happy. He was defeated. He could not get the reforms underway. And that says that President Ramaphosa actually does not have that support he needs for Treasury in order for Treasury to do what he wants Treasury to do. It doesn't mean Treasury cannot push the reforms, but they will push them by the time they become inevitable when you look at the fiscus. At the moment of a crisis, you would want the leverage. You would want to do it at the time that you can actually influence which way the reforms are going, influence the pace. You don't want to do it at the time where you just have to march along. There isn't much you can decide upon. And it seems as if we are getting to that point where it's becoming a crisis.
But I mean, Doctor, isn't the president just weak? I mean, he has the card which he can play that if you guys don't do what I do, I'm pretty much the only reason why you are still even close to 50%. So, I mean, it seems like he can do pretty much precisely what he wants. So why doesn't he just pull through?
I mean, the ANC will not acknowledge the reality that even I mean, the ANC generally, they will not acknowledge the reality that president of the ANC is the one who carried the party through a difficult election. I mean, they are not going to acknowledge that. It was actually even a bone of contention immediately after the election. I remember very well in 2019, it was being raised, but it is also being raised now in relation to the local government election, when Mbalula has been saying that the ANC election head, Fikile Mbalula, has been saying that President Ramaphosa's face, the use of President Ramaphosa's face is sexually held. But does it actually give the president a leverage within the ANC? Not very much. I mean, I concede, I understand where, and I think it is almost reality that he helped the party through. It would have been catastrophe. They ran the local government election with the face of the president, avoiding local government issues. They survived. They just managed to crawl through the local government election. And that should mean the president can use that to fine-tune the party. But no, actually, it's not being acknowledged. And the president is now looking to re-election. Look at the problem that is happening within ESCOM. If you could go the sledgehammer approach at ESCOM, it will massively, massively upset the patronage network that still exists within the party and is tied up to state-owned entities, some of which the president had not yet disentangled. He could only scratch on the surface. I mean, the CEO of ESCOM came out and said there is still state capture at ESCOM. So it actually tells you that the president does not have that leverage. And the big concern now is the next elective conference of the ANC. He has just performed badly in the election, even if his personality factor might have helped the party survive. But he presided upon electoral disaster. The ANC is not doing so well. So these are things that are making the electoral conference of the ANC even more difficult for him.
That's interesting that you say that the ANC is actually questioning whether Ramaphosa helped him or not within this election. I mean, I'd say, I think a recent poll showed that Ramaphosa is way more popular than the party. So clearly they're not looking at the data. But I mean, you mentioned the local election. Do you think this local election was a political earthquake? Was it the harbinger of change to come?
A big one. I mean, one of the things I say in my book is how South Africa is going to move closer to regionalization. And what I'm saying is to say that in the future, it will not matter who runs South Africa. It will not matter who's the president, but it will matter who's the mayor of your town. Because I believe that political power is becoming more regionalized. Small political powers are noticing that they don't have to spread their wings across the country or maybe their presence across the country equitably. They can just focus on particular regions and showcase success in those areas, and that will be a success on its own. You don't need to be run Limpopo and Gauteng. You can just run one area and still be a success and be in the history of success, political success in South Africa. And I think we're going there. So I think local government has actually displaced the ANC in those regions. And I think what I thought I was pointing at is actually happening faster than I thought. I mean, I did not anticipate the ANC not running some of the metros in Johannesburg in the manner that it seems to be the case. Johannesburg, possibly the city of Tshwane, possibly, and Ekurhuleni, no doubt. So it's happening much faster. And these parties, they are going now to face the ANC at national level, because the ANC will try by all means to use Section 139 to infiltrate the running of those municipalities. But I think this is how municipalities are going to evolve to becoming more and more autonomous sphere of government. And hence these elections matter a great, great deal in pointing the country towards that regional consolidation of political power.
What do you think is the play by the EFF and ActionSA to support the DA and the free cities in Gauteng? Because obviously it puts the DA in quite a difficult position, because they say they don't want to go into coalition with the EFF. So either those mayors are going to have to work with them or resign. So what do you think is going to happen there?
Well, first and foremost is that the DA reluctantly accepted the EFF vote, and the EFF can just pull the plug anytime they want. They've done it before. Look, the EFF strategy persists in these coalitions. They called the DA to the table to say, let's have a coalition. The DA said no, and they said that it's fine. We'll give you our vote anyway, and we'll still achieve what we will still achieve, even if we were in a coalition with you anyway. We will threaten to collapse the coalition. We'll make demands on you. That's what's going to happen. Because as long as you don't have an agreement on the common purpose, you don't have an agreement as to what is it that will be pursued by those coalitions, we know the only pattern that is left remaining to be observed is that of disruption. That's what we have seen since 2016 local government election. And I think that is what the EFF is playing here. The EFF, remember, does not want to take accountability for any council placed under governed through a coalition, but they want to get the maximum returns out of those coalitions.
And what do you think is ActionSA's future? I mean, they were the big surprise of this local election. Do you think, I've heard Dr. Krokamp said that in BizNews that ActionSA will be the second largest party in 2024. Do you think that's a possibility, and that Mashaba can be the premier of Gauteng?
It is not unthinkable that they can be the second largest party. I mean, it's all about what they do from now. Let me tell you something that I've observed about ActionSA. I sit with Mashaba. He's a good friend of mine. I can call him that. I disagree with him politically, but one thing I'll always tell you about him is his genuineness when he presents his issues. He can be wrong. I disagree with him on a lot of issues, publicly so. He will write an opinion article stating how crazy I am that I've never run a party. But I know he's very genuine. And South Africa's politics lack that genuineness in it. And I think that because he's not part of the system, if they can remain not part of the system and consolidate, they are a party to watch. Because one thing after this election that they come out clear is that they're coming out as votable. I don't know if you know what I mean. And I don't even know if there is a word such as that, but let me try to explain what I mean. Here is a party that nobody knows, formed out of anger with the DA. Mr. Mashaba came about, some consultation, and performed as if he was an established institution. And a lot of people, I would say, I heard them speaking about him, but I don't think he came out as votable because he was never voted as ActionSA. But the amount of vote they have attained in this election might inspire a lot of confidence that this party is actually votable. And I think they're a big threat to the EFF. I had a model that I thought it was settling down. It was being broken into pieces. And just a quick display, a quick explanation. My model was that when it comes to the opposition parties in South Africa, position number 1 and number 2 have always went to the ANC and the DA. Position 3 usually went to another new party. It will be COPE, it will be the EFF. But the EFF was the first one to occupy position 2 election on election. In their maiden, position 3, in their maiden election in 2014, in 2019. But that looks like it's going to be disturbed, because I don't think they will remain number 3 dominant party. There's going to be a lot of commotion when it comes to what is the second and the third party. And ActionSA might be part of the movement around in those lines.
Absolutely. And I think it can spell a death blow to the EFF if Julius Malema were to be charged for a crime, because there's so many charges racking up against him. But do you think Mashaba can be bitter at times, and that bitterness is tarnishing his objectivity towards the Democratic Alliance or working with the Democratic Alliance?
I think political maturity based on experience, or political maturity comes with experience as well. I do think that, look at what they've done. They rejected the idea of the coalition, the dictator, the way in which they were dictated, but they still voted to remove the ANC. So it's not totally lost within the opposition. I do think indeed there are personalities, there are egos within the opposition. Mr. Mashaba speaks his mind. He speaks his mind, no doubt about it. And he might come across as someone who is not willing to compromise. But I do think if you look at how the opposition parties performed, including the EFF, even if it was a reluctant vote, they still achieved something, which is to threaten the political base of the dominant party, that is the ANC. That on its own means that they can actually go back and talk. They voted together. Why can't they go back and try to explain what they've just done in terms of saying, look, let's have a coalition then. We are where we are. We accidentally formed government out of our common despise of the ANC. Why don't we just allow this accident to be something else? Why can't we work towards a coalition? Why can't we share power? And Mashaba spoke about that idea of co-governing and sharing power. Why can't the DA also come around on that as well? The DA also as well. The relationship between Mashaba and the DA, no doubt, it has got impacts on whether you form coalition in Johannesburg, Gauteng, because of the history. But I think they can overcome that.
Doctor, do you think ActionSA has an appeal outside of Gauteng? Do you think they can, for example, expand their base in a place like KwaZulu-Natal?
I think that anything is possible. South Africans are very forgiving to new parties. If you look at the percentage of vote that ActionSA has attained, you ask yourself, what is it that the party has achieved? It's no more than, it has not existed for more than 3 years. So it is about South Africans' willingness to try out new things, as long as you don't come tainted or excessively tainted, if you like. So I do think that there is an opportunity to go outside, to go to other areas out there. Mashaba has been a businessman whose business has actually reached those areas. One or another, he should know how to go back and take his politics back there. He should know the model. He should have a model in place.
Yeah, no, definitely. Doctor, in your book, you mentioned that the DA was not smart in going back to the root of identity politics with Helen Zille coming back into the party. What would you do if you were now, I don't know, the campaign manager of the DA? How do you get back to the center? What would practical steps would you do to get back to the center of politics if you were now in charge of the Democratic Alliance?
The DA has pulled a miracle in Gauteng with all these councils and all that. And I think that we all know that their strategy to expand into Gauteng and so forth, it was dead with the likes of Mashaba and Maimane leaving the party, but it might be resuscitated if they allow the local leaders to actually lead in the party reaching out. It should be about people listening to each other. The DA leaders should go around and understand various regions and also just take heed from the challenges that is being confronted by their leaders in various regions. I don't know, they call them federal leaders or federal provincial leaders. But I do think that with what they've pulled in Gauteng, they should try to build on that and try to see if they can try to rebuild that center, try to showcase something different from what they tried to attempt recently.
Don't you think the problem is also Helen Zille, quite frankly? I spoke yesterday to R.V. Johnson. He's a political analyst who frequently writes about these matters. And he says that he believes it's time for Helen Zille to retire, because one of the problems with Helen Zille is also that it's seen as the party of John Steenhuisen and Helen Zille. He overshadows him. So, and that will always be a problem. So isn't it time for Helen Zille to step aside?
I mean, the return of Helen Zille was quite mysterious. I mean, I didn't understand why did the DA thought that they needed to take that step to retain Helen Zille, and also knowing how divisive she has been within the, in her debates. I mean, she raised some of the debates that you ask yourself, what is there to be gained? Suppose you're intellectually correct, but what's there to be gained for the society? I mean, all those tweets around colonialism and all stuff, going to court around all these things. I mean, but I think that perhaps the return of Helen Zille, it says something big. It's not a simple issue of just Zille. It's a symptom of something within the DA. It's a yearning for something else. It's the DA wanting to reconstitute itself into something else. I don't know what it is, but I wouldn't want to dismiss by just saying if Zille is gone, the problem is gone. I think now Zille is almost an institution now, if you ask me.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. Talking about internal battles, I recently saw an interview of Magashule saying, I mean, he's moaning constantly now in interviews, but he said that it's unique now that the ANC is factionalized. But I mean, that's not entirely true, is it? I mean, the factional battles go all the way back to at least the beginning of Zuma's presidency. I mean, Magashule was part of the Zuma camp that ousted Mbeki. So it's not entirely true of him to say that factionalism is something unique today.
No, factionalism in the ANC goes back to the time of exile. I mean, it has always been part and parcel of the ANC. I mean, it's just that the ANC in power, of course, factionalism in power will be accentuated by and amplified by access to power that the ANC has. And in recent years, I mean, it goes far back. President Mbeki was ousted in a factional battle by the Zuma fans, and they would themselves be ousted as well and be pushed as well from positions of power within the ANC. The only thing perhaps maybe is that it's come full circle. Magashule did not notice, but it's been going on. So I don't think there is anything unique about that.
But didn't Magashule just not pick a side? He betrayed Mbeki. I believe he promised him something and he didn't deliver. I can't remember that entire story. Isn't there something like that?
There was a point. I mean, he has never been a political ally of President Mbeki. Actually, President Mbeki avoided Magashule's premiership for a while during the time he was still the chairperson, one of the longest serving provincial chairperson of the ANC, Mr. Magashule. But he has not really come into any conflict with President Mbeki. The last time I had was when Magashule was consulting people around the step aside, and President Mbeki was one of the people to be consulted, and that's the last I heard of it. And other than that, Mr. Magashule has been largely preoccupied with the case involving corruption, I think, and some of the challenges that some of the students, unfortunately, who have been sent overseas were having in relation to funding and so forth. Those are some of the issues I've seen.
So, Doctor, the last question I want to ask you is about title deeds that you mentioned in your book, ANC's Last Decade. Can you tell our viewers how title deeds can help South Africa alleviate many of the problems here? Because much of the land is still owned by the state. So how can title deeds solve that issue?
I mean, the whole pinnacle, we are a capitalist society, and we are a market society, and I don't think we are still willing to deny any of that. We are not first-year students. We are going to debate the extent to which we are that we settle. So as part of being a market society, a constitutional democracy, private ownership is very much important. And the mere fact that you can actually put value on a piece of land that you do not own, it cannot be understood as a fair arrangement in a market society. I mean, I've looked into this thing, and most of the times I speak to asset managers across various institutions in South Africa, and I always challenge them that When you go to rural areas under traditional leadership in this country, you've got a lot of portfolio of property that nobody knows its worth. Because what's the point of knowing how much is it worth? Because it's not being ascertained in line with the normal market procedures. Nobody owns that. You've got huge houses all across and all this installation, and people only have permission to occupy. And it is 2021, the 11th, the 23rd, and it's all normal. We call ourselves a market society where we protect the right to property. There is something very sinister about this. And this brings the ANC into direct confrontation with traditional authorities. It is a challenge that the ANC has avoided. And for me, it means that all the property you have, this huge portfolio, it's lost to the economy. We cannot bring in, imagine people cannot borrow against their hard labor of the assets that they have. They cannot multiply their capital and so forth. It's a shame, I think.
Yeah, just one last question. I forgot to ask this of you. And speaking of capital, it seems like it was Motsepe and Ramaphosa were one of the main people that donated to the ANC. They're keeping the ANC alive. Can't you say that they have essentially captured the ANC?
The relationship between the ANC and money, quite troubled. I mean, the money that was raised by President Cyril Ramaphosa in any democracy, you don't have to belong to a faction to actually ask the amount of distortion that the money, such kind of money create on democratic processes. And again, I'm raising an issue here that we did not talk about, but I think we will in the near future. The question of how far do we go inside political parties when it comes to the use of money? I mean, Americans are going deep. They've got what they call the political action committees. They've got requirement. I mean, there are challenges there, those who try to circumvent the rules, but at least they are not naive about the money that goes inside parties and the extent to which it influences policy, and therefore it has to be regulated. So when you speak about the billionaires in South Africa who will just donate money like that, I always ask, for what? If you're already too rich, there's no such thing as free donation. It's a question of what you get in return. Can we live with it or we cannot? Hence, transparency is very much important regarding what goes on inside parties.
And yeah, who could disagree with that? But Doctor, thank you so much for your time. This has been such a fascinating conversation. I want to give you one last opportunity to plug or say anything that you want to.
Well, it's been a great pleasure talking to you. And my view here is that I think that South Africa looks like it's disintegrating. But again, I'm a political scientist. I always believe that for measure identities in society to be reformed, measure alliances to shift, for the society to reground itself, uncertainty is unfortunately the most short-term problem we have to deal with. The uncertainty in our politics, we are going to have to live with it. But for me, I see major reforms in our society after that. I don't see doom and gloom.
It's always darkest before the dawn. But thank you, Doctor. Thank you so much for your time. To our viewers, if you've made it this far, you most certainly enjoy this content. Please consider liking this video, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel. My name is Donald, and you've been watching WorldView.